What would happen if you try to breathe and there's no oxygen, no air? What would happen when a plant that, opening up its leaves, tries to capture some sunlight to undergo photosynthesis, turning light energy into sugar, glucose, finds itself without light, without any sunlight? What would happen? You cannot practice the Dhamma on your own terms. People need to understand this. Because this time period of our humanity, this generation of human beings, seems to be extremely conceited. This idea of a selfhood and my way is the only way, or the best way. I mean, we can try to look for the causes for such a unhealthy approach, but ultimately it doesn't matter. We see the problem and it needs to be addressed, each one for themselves. No one can do that for us. Plus, there's this big mountain called the person's own idea that I am not wrong. My methods of doing this practice, the way I see it, in the appropriate doses that I deem to be the best, is the problem. But the person doesn't see that. So they won't be able to allow another to ultimately help. So what essentially then is truly occurring is the lack of true and genuine trust. Same thing with the air that's missing and you're trying to gulp a little bit of oxygen and you can't. You're expecting oxygen to be around, not some of the time, but all of the time. Otherwise, that's the end of life, as you know it. Yes? So similarly with trust, similarly with having faith, you cannot just have it one moment and then not have it another. So this is a big problem for individuals, because ultimately they come and they have to face the music, as they say, sooner or later. And for many people it is later, when the damage is done. This is in the course of practice, which, by the way, need not let us forget or omit the time that it took them to get to the Dhamma in the first place, thanks to some seeds that they've laid in past lives, which are getting an opportunity to sprout. But that sprouting does not necessarily, or should not necessarily, make us think that this is it, it's going to be a full-blown tree, fruit-bearing tree, and everything's going to be great, and you're going to attain the highest that the Dhamma offers. No. That will not be possible unless there is full dedication. And that full dedication comes from the person. Full dedication not to a person necessarily, to a someone, but to what this path demands, what this path requires. Because what essentially is happening, we fall back into whatever we felt comfortable. The same thing is seen, of course, in physical training, fitness, like, when you train your body. Your body is lazy. By nature, it is lazy. Well, same thing for the mind, for the brain even. To train yourself to get into a new habit requires tremendous work. Now, before you've reached that optimum point where or level where it is just, the momentum was just right, then it seems to be a little bit easier or a lot easier, but it has taken you a lot. Now, in the case of the mind, when we're working on purifying it, it's ongoing. Because you're working with and often against many, many, many factors. Now, there's a term that Lord Buddha has used. The term is avidya. Often it's given this neutered term, ignorance. Almost, it's passive. It's lifeless, in essence. It doesn't do anything. Ignorance, okay, what does that mean? Ignorance of what? Because when those moments come, hot, intense, states of excitedness or agitation, you don't care to look at what this word is or what it signifies. You're gone. You're totally in it. It's dominating. It's dominating your life. It's taken over. So it's no longer even important, even valid. There's a dog here barking. It's okay. So what do you do? What should you do? Effort must be placed. Effort in the right place. And this is where it's extremely necessary for you to pause and admit that you do not have all the answers. You can never have all the answers. No one can. Because what ultimately you're defying against, because there's defiance, there's a rebelliousness, there is an attitude of arrogance. And in the presence of such a state, what is happening is you're saying to the Dhamma itself that you know better. You will take yourself, walk yourself into the Dhamma and what the Dhamma offers according to your own dictates, according to your own schema, according to your own agendas, according to your own plan, master plan. You see where the conceit, how the conceit is manifesting here. The old methods of running your life don't apply anymore when you come to the Dhamma. For the basic stuff, sure. For the daily, activities and how you run your life, this and that, fine. Superficial things, fine. But not when it comes to the Dhamma and understanding how it unfolds. There needs to be trust. So earlier when I was saying about the breath, you reach over, you open up your lungs and try to breathe. You're expecting there to be oxygen and air. The same thing with faith. The same thing with trust. You cannot trust one moment, one day, 1 week, 1 year, and then not the other. Your blood circulates constantly. If it stops, guess what? You have blood clotting forming and your heart just stops because the heart needs the blood cells to be fluid. Why do people, when they do CPR, do compressions, chest compressions, heart compressions? Why do they do that? To push the blood, to keep it moving. Otherwise, it will quickly solidify. And once it happens, done. You're done. Those capillaries, those thin veins and arteries, they're gone. They're full of dried, solidified blood cells. No longer liquid, no longer fluid. Same thing with the brain and everywhere else in the body. It needs to stay fluid. It needs to stay alive. Gravity is ongoing on this planet. Once it's not, guess what? The trees will be floating as, we would be floating. Everything would be floating. Nothing will be staying. Life would not happen. You need gravity. It's no different with your spiritual practice. This is why this generation of practitioners has a special challenge to face and is facing. So many people are stuck. So many people are getting stuck every day. And many people will never even come to the Dhamma for this one big problem. And that is conceit. This generation of humans especially, they won't even get onto the path proper because they're stuck. And many of them will get stuck even after they've started the path. So be careful if you're one of them. When things aren't growing, when things aren't moving, when things aren't fluid enough, when the Dhamma is not happening, you're forcing it to happen. You're trying to make the Dhamma unfold, forcing it to become something. So you have to remove yourself from the equation here. How you think, what you think should be the case, how you think should be, things should be unfolding and taking place. And no, reading a book and being inspired or moved or touched by a certain scene, a certain instruction, a certain verse, it's just that. It's temporary. So you cannot attribute that to yourself and your own progress. That's just wishful thinking. It's like walking out of a movie theater and thinking that you are the hero. I remember when we were teenagers, we would go and watch these martial arts movies. And after the movie's over, we would walk out of the theater and we would just be feeling like we are the protagonist, we are the hero. We can punch, we can kick, we can, take on all these enemies and this, where are those antagonists? Where are those people? It's quite juvenile, it's quite childish. This path requires us to be mature, not childish. We need to be open, we need to be aware, we need to be wise enough to choose every day to place ourselves back on the path and drop the old tendencies. Because by camouflaging the sankharas, by camouflaging the old habitual drives with new terminology, new ways of understanding the Dhamma, new ways of being influenced by the Dhamma through reading, listening to Dhamma talks, reading suttas, etc. They will never get rid of the sankharas. They will never get rid of those habitual drives. Plain and simple. You're just fooling yourself because you're still in the mire, you're still in the cesspool of delusion, which in essence is suffering, dukkha. You alone will pull yourself out of it, nobody else. A teacher is simply a teacher. If you allow them to, by the way. And the only way you can allow them is by trusting. But you can't live like, a free agent, as celebrities or athletes especially. Some athletes, they've become their own managers and agents. So they dictate what they want, where they're going to play, how much they sign up for in their contract. So you can't bring that mentality of being a rebel or a free agent, wanting to do things on your terms with the Dhamma. When it's the Dhamma involved, you can't do that. That's what I'm trying to say. And expect growth. At the most, you're just going to be a spectator to the suttas, to the stories, or to the Dhamma talks. Just be a little bit inspired, and that's the end of that. Nothing's happening, and there goes another life. At the most, you know a little bit more suttas and stories here and there, which you will forget, by the way, by when it's time for the next life. And perhaps you would gain some merits because you are moved enough to do some good deeds. Fine. And at the same time, avoid doing some bad deeds. Fine. But the Dhamma is much more than that. Much more than that. But you won't be able to discover your fullest potential so long as you're holding on to the idea that you know best. That has to go out the window when you enter or want to enter the path. The Dhamma will never work on your own terms. Understand that. That's not the way it is. It's even the Buddha. He was forcing his way upon the Dhamma for 6.5 years. I know best, he said. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take it all the way. Well, guess what? He was about to die, going his, way, his dictates. So stop the foolishness and really get on the path. By bringing in trust, by bringing in faith, and by bringing obedience. Obedience, the other word that today's generation of people are afraid of using or even encountering. Not obeying a person, mind you. But moving away from obeying your own proclivities, your own drives. They're the ones that got you this far in samsara, by the way, from life to life. Not your trust in the Dhamma. Your trust in the Dhamma did not drag you from samsara to samsara, from birth, death. That's not the fault of the Dhamma. That's your disobedience. That's your obedience to your own so-called natural tendencies, quote unquote. Remember, conceit or mana is one of the fetters that holds so many people back from attaining arahantship, from attaining awakening. This is not unique to you. So be mindful of this.